Welcome to the show, Cathy Adams.
Thank you for having me, Jason. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to get a little time with you, fellow parent here. And gosh, I just so appreciate you putting your heart and soul into a book that is going to be useful for us parents.
Thank you. It was a labor of love, as you know, because you wrote a book as well. So you kind of have to take all your insides and put them outside.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. So before we get into some of your parenting philosophy and tips for parents that are listening, and if people are not a parent, I always say you have parents, and this is still likely valuable for you as well. Mm-hmm. But if we just kind of, I'm curious how you got into being a person who cares so much about parenting, and why do a radio show eventually? I think you guys started as a radio show, didn't you?
We started as a podcast, but it was before anybody knew what a podcast was. So that's why we called it Zen Parenting Radio, because we didn't even know what a podcast was. You know what I mean? So we just kind of went with the old school version.
Nice. And why start a podcast so long ago? What year did you guys start? I feel like it was,
let's see, was that 2011? Because it's been 11. So I think we started in a December, and we were crossing over into the next year. So it was 2010 or 2011. And, just kind of taking that question about, why I got into working with parents, I'll start there and then go into the podcast part, is that I'm trained as a child and family therapist, and I worked at a major children's hospital here in Chicago where I live. And I worked there for a long time, and my focus was on the children. So I worked in a partial hospitalization program, mid-level. So there's inpatient, partial, and then inpatient. And so I worked with kids who were with us all day. And I worked as a clinical educator. I was the teacher, and I was also a therapist. And I found that the kids that I was working with, when they'd be with us for 3-4 days, sometimes a week, they would leave with a full understanding of what they wanted to change, a direction maybe they were going in that wasn't going to be helpful, and tools that they could use. And it would be this amazing, we'd have this big graduation. And then, to no big surprise here, they would leave the program. And then a couple of weeks later, a month later, they would cycle back through. And it's because you can teach the kids this, but if they're going back to a home where the parents don't have an understanding of what we're talking about, it's very difficult for them to maintain those behaviors. So that was my understanding of, I want to work with adults. I want to work with parents. I love working with the kids too, but that seems like second tier to me, because they seem to pick it up quickly, where the parents have a lot of things they need to unlearn or hear for the first time. There's a little more work to be done, right?
Yeah.
I started, that was my first shift, but then I also became a parent. I had my daughter while I was still working at the hospital. And so I also then shifted into the identity crisis of becoming a mother and deciding that path. I had worked my whole life to become a therapist, grad school, and paid for it, did all that, got my office, and then stayed home. And I'm very happy that was the decision I make, but I did have an identity crisis. I didn't know how to not be Cathy, the education professional woman. So I started, working with parents that way, started writing, and that was the process of writing my first book and newsletter and everything. That is how I learned about podcasting. So that was my in, was first my professional experience, then my personal experience, and then that got me to where I am.
So cool. And there's many things I want to ask you about there. So working with kids inpatient, these were kids who were forced to be there or brought there by the government or Child Protective Services or what?
Yeah, most of the time it was the parents. I would say 90% of the time, maybe even 95% of the time, it was parents who were struggling with what was happening with their children, their inability to manage their behavior. If they were on inpatient, which is they stay all day and all night, there had to be homicidal ideation or suicidal ideation. So it was a more these children need to be supported. To
intervention
keep them safe.
Now.
Exactly. The immediate. My level, partial, was just a step below, where they could still go home and the parents could keep them safe, but there were things that were headed in that direction.
Okay. And when you say kids, are we talking 5-year-olds or are we talking 15-year-olds?
4 to 18.
Okay. Wow. Good range there. And now it makes sense. This is something I want to get into in our conversation. It makes sense that a parent whose child is, we could say, acting out or having suicidal ideation or having, big behavior problems, discipline, just not listening, whatever, that the parent would think that the problem is the child. This is like so 101, right? It's like parents really believe terrible twos. It's the 2-year-old's problem. And they actually, many parents do not have any understanding that it's them or that they're part of the problem. Like, will you speak to that? Like, especially when you saw the relapse going on where kids they'd go back into the system. And I worked in residential treatment with adolescents, so I know exactly what you're talking about. They'd go back home and they'd go right back to their behaviors because they couldn't sustain what they learned because there was no one there supporting them with the new sort of paradigm and new tools, right?
Exactly. Well, it's like, you talk about this all the time with your writing and work. It's cycles. And these parents have lived a cycle. Many of them, it's all these different levels, cycles of poverty, cycles of abuse. And they have learned through their experiences, when you're a child, you're treated this way and they were treated that way. And when you become a parent, you're in charge. And I'm talking about extreme versions here. And they would treat their children the same way they were treated. And then when their children would act out in a certain way or be what they considered to be, unsafe, or they were hurting other people, then they would, the parents would bring them to the hospital. And what I will say to, speak to on a positive note is that there were many parents who really wanted to learn. They would, the goal as the child and family therapist was, I spent most of my time with the kid, but there were plenty of parents in my office saying, please help me, teach me, give me the resources. So while there were many parents that didn't show up for a lot of sessions, there were the same amount, if not more, that really wanted to learn, but had to deal with their own history, reconcile that, and then try to figure out how to parent in a new way.
Totally. Yeah. So I get there's a range. And in your experience after all these years, would you say it's more prevalent that parents are kind of asleep, or more that they're willing to learn?
More that they're willing to learn.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like, a lot of the language we learn that we talk about now, as far as being self-aware, like these things that, like, my first class that I taught about self-awareness and self-care was probably 20 years ago, and nobody knew what the hell I was talking about. And I had to explain, everyone's like, I don't have money for a babysitter. I don't, are you telling me I'm not supposed to care about my kid and I'm supposed to think about me? And now there's this understanding. The language is the beginning, right? When we start to understand the words and the language and the possibilities. And now parents, they have an understanding that it's okay to ask for help. Whereas before, I remember a line I used to use all the time, Jason, is I always had to say to parents, like, Tiger Woods has a swing coach, right? So the best of the best of the best has a coach. You are a parent. You've never done this before. So you're not the best of the best. And you're acting like you don't need any support, help, intervention of any kind. And we all do. And I could speak to it. I was a therapist. I was a parent coach, and I needed support.
Right.
So,
Yeah, completely. I remember hiring our first parent coach when I was a kid. She was a therapist, but also a parent coach, because my son was kind of hitting our daughter and acting out. And I was trying to talk to him like he was a 17-year-old and he was, totally. 3. Anyway, I needed help, and I'm a dude with a lot of tools.
Yeah.
But I needed to learn how to talk to children, like really young children, right? It was very powerful for me. Anyway, let's zoom out for a minute and we'll talk about, I'm curious about, just after all these years, what is your parenting philosophy in terms of, like, what is Zen parenting? Maybe that's the umbrella term, but what are we talking about here?
That's a good question. So the parenting philosophy, like the language that comes to me right when you say that, is connection, curiosity, compassion, self-awareness. Like, I'm throwing a lot of words at you, but really the core is connection, and all those other pieces are what helps allow for connection. Because I think for a long time, I think the shift in understanding parenting is really going back to understanding human behavior. And I think before, we had such an understanding of, like, parenting was a hierarchy. You're above them. They do what you say. You're in charge. Doesn't matter what their opinion is. You're the parent. There's like an old school dynamic there. And I think what we now understand better is that parenting, being with our children is just another human interaction. And how do we treat and relate to our kids in a way where they feel seen, heard, and valued? And how do we make sure in our life we are feeling seen, heard, and valued, and we can create a connection that is sustaining throughout a lifetime? Because, right now, Jason, my girls I have 3 daughters, 18, 17, and 14. And there is, I have a daughter in college now. We're in a peer type relationship. Yes, she's still my daughter and I am still the parent, and she still comes to me for things she needs, but I am no longer overseeing her and telling her what to do or wear. Not that I ever really did that, but it shifts. And how do you stay connected to these human beings and be in relationship? That's another, it's obviously one of your big words, but relationship and connection. That's what we're going for on the show. And that's what I write about.
Yeah. I love that you're also not talking about this isn't like a discipline book. No. This is to me, it's like a philosophy book. You're talking about chakras. And I love the model you use around being, doing will you just unpack why the chakras and why that matters to you personally? And did you use this kind of stuff with your kids and were they like, Mom, you're so weird? Or is this more of an in the background kind of thing informing you as you parented your kids?
Both, because it's hard to pull them apart because it is so much of who I am. And my children know me so well that yes, they've always been a little like, Mom, you're weird, but they also have known it their whole lives. So they're a little weird. Like they when I say weird, I'm using that word just to mean they're kind of, the
endearing.
word we often use is a little crunchy. You know what I mean? We're very grounded people, very, I say use everything in the world that applies to you. So I'm not completely holistic in every way. I also don't believe that if you don't do meditation or yoga one day, you failed. I think you are human and you have all the experiences. But yoga, I'm a therapist, but I'm a yoga teacher. And I also just, as many people do, come into the world a little more spiritual and sensitive, not special, not better than, I just feel things so intensely. And it used to be, to me, I perceived it as a detriment. Like it wasn't a great thing. It made life and energy pretty rough for me. Like I had to kind of learn how to set boundaries and develop my own tools. But I have found that not just the practice of yoga, but the yoga off the mat, like what are we trying to do? Find, our own sense of balance in the world, strive like in, as far as the chakras go, which for those many listening may already know, but it's the energy centers in our body. And it's the way that we stay in alignment with ourselves. And you can understand this I say in the book, like, if you really want to dive deep into chakra awareness, there are so many teachers that write about it so eloquently. And I'm using it more as a structure or a scaffolding to bring all these issues into people's awareness. Like it's just a great way to structure, I found. And it was authentic to me because I talk about these things all the time anyway. But that first chakra is all about grounding and balance and rooting and feeling that sense of belonging to the earth and the world. And without that, like just chakra 1, it's so intense because without a sense of knowing you belong or feeling rooted in who you are, it's very difficult to grow.
Yeah.
And in yoga, we call that root to rise.
Root to rise, yeah.
So it's every single chakra has this awareness where you go, wow, if this fails me, or if I don't pay attention to this, I can see why things go off the rails.
Yeah, completely. And I love that first chakra in terms of just the root to rise. Like, how do we get our kids grounded? And you talk obviously about the self-awareness piece, like, well, are you grounded as a parent?
Right.
It's one thing to claim you're raising a grounded kid and I want you in your body and here on the earth and able to be with yourself and your feelings, but it's a whole nother thing to live that, right?
Exactly.
How important is that in your philosophy? That's, this practice what we preach kind of thing.
It's everything. For anyone who's listened to Todd and my show, Zen Parenting Radio, the first thing we see is, parent self-understanding is the most important thing when raising a child. If it's not about that everything's your fault or that it's all on you, but if you don't have self-understanding, if you don't have a sense of what you want to teach, if you don't have a sense of self, then your children don't know what a sense of self looks like.
Yeah.
We can't teach sense of self with words. We can't lecture it. And and at the very beginning, when you were saying, when it comes to parenting podcasts or books, if people aren't parents, they've had parents, and you're exactly right. And I also feel like for the show, we don't really talk about parenting. We talk about the individuals. And this is how, we talk about self-awareness and we talk about self-exploration and self-regulation. And then that contributes to your parenting. But I know, because I teach at a university outside of the city, and a big part of our listenership, not just from my students, but our college students who are like trying to figure out, like, how do I find this sense of self now that I'm on my own? And the parenting part, they relate to it from their history, but it's irrelevant, really.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I love sort of the base level, I just want to stay here for a minute. What I would call secure attachment, really. It's like being a self-aware enough parent to provide, a place where a child feels like they're safe in their own body and safe in the world, and they belong. I mean, it's so straightforward, yet it's amazing how just a few traumas, a few co-working parents who are working all the time and just throw the kid in childcare or whatever, how just whatever the situation is can really impact that foundation. And then it makes the growing tree like kind of compromised, right?
It does. And there's so many things that parents tell me they do with love. They'll say, I do this because I love my child. Some of them are very, specific, like you said, like, I have to work. I have to make sure that, we're putting food on the table, which is real, like, I'm a social worker, like, I'm understanding all the societal implications of you, especially if you're a single parent, you have to do what you have to do. But then there's these other things like, my child, I'm going to put them in dance class. I'm going to make them play the piano. They need to play sports because they need to understand team dynamics. They need to do these things. And as parents, we approach our children with, these are the things you're going to do to be a good person, or so you can live a life like I did, or vice versa, a life different than I did. And they're not asking or noticing the child. They're saying, this is the plan. And there's no question of, is this who you are? Is this what you want? How does this feel? So that thing that you're just speaking to, that sense of belonging, that groundedness, even if they have the stability at home in the safety and the security of like finances and food, they get uprooted because someone's telling them the things you like, it doesn't matter. You need to do these things. And so they get uprooted by not being able to trust who they are.
And that can be really hard as a parent. I'm speaking from personal experience here, to trust our kids' values,
right?
Which are different from ours, right?
Right.
And wow, can I really trust that you don't like playing violin and you don't like music, and not keep making you do it because I think it's good for your, bilateral, proprioception and all these like logical, heady reasons that I could easily justify as a parent to make my kid play music. Like, I grew up playing piano and I hated it, never liked it. Once I quit, it was like freedom again. And I was like, never look back.
Right.
Because it wasn't my trip. It was like my mom's trip, you're going to play piano.
Exactly.
So how does a parent like know this is going on, and how do they make that shift when they're putting their agendas
together? I mean, first of all, that I'm just to speak to that, because that comes up all the time. The piano, and it's always piano. Like, it's like we get a piano and then we're like, kid, you're going to play this. And I've been saying this to parents for 10 years. You take piano because you obviously find meaning to the parent. You take piano. And then the interesting thing is, your child may be like, that's interesting, or that sounds good. Or they may be like, oh, I don't want to hear you play piano, but you lead the way with what you think's important. But off that track for a second, what you were saying about trusting their value system, I think everything is nuanced, right? So I think oftentimes on the show, when Todd and I talk about these things, trusting your child or helping them develop their values, and people perceive it as permissive parenting, and they get very binary about it. Either you're in charge or you're not in charge. And if you're not in charge, they're walking all over you. And if you're in charge, then you're, mean or too strict.
Tyrant,
and there's all this gray in between where, like with our girls, it just so happens in our, school district around fourth grade is they get to choose an instrument and they get to play that instrument and be in a band or an orchestra. And we said to the girls, choose one, do it, like, give it a try. Just that's part of school. Like it was just, you choose an instrument. Now, one of my daughters played through sophomore year of high school. And one of my daughters quit in 8th grade and one of my daughters quit in 5th grade. Like they had their experience. They went as far as they wanted with it. And we kind of, once they learned, because I'm with you, Jason, like I know that learning music, if it be through singing or an instrument, it helps develop the brain in these ways that are really important. So we can know that, but also not believe that our children need to pursue this as an academic endeavor or as a professional endeavor or as the way they get into college. Like they have developed that understanding of reading music, and then it continues with listening to music and with watching other people play music. So we have to trust the process of that too, that they picked up what they needed. Yeah, nice. I love that. If you live in the United States and you want to receive text messages from me about my personal life or little daily reminders, you can do that now. It's so cool. And you just need to text the number 720-704-4852, or you can go to my.community.com/Jason Gaddis. And that way you can sign up for text. And if you just text me podcast, I know you came from the podcast, and I will be sending you text messages. You can always stop at any time just by typing in STOP. All right? Yeah, I look forward to connecting with you on your phone, folks. I'm going to assume, just to talk about your own parenting for a minute, if you're willing, because I know you and Todd are very open on your podcast about your parenting foibles and victories and all that. For sure. Will you take us to a moment where, I guess, parenting, there was a power struggle between you and one of your kids, and whether it was about values or your kid, you felt like your kid was in harm's way, and you had to have the hard conversations of how much do we intervene here? How much do we let them struggle? This is their battle. It's on them. I'll be here emotionally, but I'm not going to do it for them. Because I think we're living in a time with so much information. Parents, we're kind of inundated now about how to do it. And there's no shortage of good information, actually. And we could shit ourselves to death about. And that, to me, what I see here in Boulder is over parenting. Where people are not letting their kids fall down in a way. I'm curious how you and Todd have navigated that, and if there's a specific example. Yeah, I'll give you two. One when my daughter was really young, and then another when my daughter's was much older. And the young one was, and I just remember it. So it was such a visceral thing because it was my oldest daughter, who's now 18, and she was 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. And she had this play group. And I remember when they'd be playing, she would always want to be the villain. And she would always want to be like the person causing the problems. They'd be playing, it would be imaginative play, but the reason it's an important story is there was a lot of issues on many levels. There was the societal discomfort with the other, parents who were there, and that my kid always wanted to like be the mean kid. There was the concern that why does she want to do that? Like what's going on with her that she always wants this role that's like, seems like a negative, dark kind of role. And then there was to your question, how much do I intervene on this? Like, is this really a problem? And there's no like simple way that it all got worked through, but just the awareness of what am I embarrassed of? What is the problem with this? What do I think other parents are going to think about me? And is that a problem? And if I am parenting from that place, how am I then harming my child? How am I deciding that other people's perception of this experience is more important than what my child feels she needs to do? And again, she wasn't hitting, she wasn't harming. She was just like, I will be the evil queen. I will be the evil, it was like a power thing. And I remember talking to her, again, she was very young. So it wasn't, it wasn't a deep one, but it was tell me about what you feel like when you are this character. And she was able to articulate in her own way that it made her feel strong, that it made her feel brave, that it made her feel like she had a confidence that she didn't always have. She didn't say it exactly this way. But it was like, but I get to be this person and they're strong and they do this. And what I kind of reconciled in myself is we all have to play a lot of roles in life to figure out who we want to be. And she may find a confidence in being that character and was eventually able, because she's not a villain, she's 18. The good news is she's not a villain. And she was able to feel that bravery, but then figure out how to move that in a way that could be felt through good things. But she only knew that if she first felt it as a villain. It was a process. So that was an interesting, I would just remember having to do a lot of deep work with like talking to Todd, like, why is this bothering me so much? Right. And what does this mean? Parents always say to me, my kid hit someone. What does this mean about who they're going to be? Yeah. And maybe we don't need to play that game. Not even maybe. We just stay here. This is where mindfulness really comes in, is let's just do our kid today now. Like, let's just be here and not assume that this means something.
Like not pigeonhole them into something. Yep.
Yeah. Don't call, well, this is my kid who always wants to do this. Just allow them to be playful. And then the one that is kind of, as a kid gets older, like I now have 2 daughters who drive, and teaching your children to drive a car is quite the experience because it's not my best skill. Let me just say that. Like Todd has definitely been more of that person, because it taps into a lot of my challenges. I tend to be more anxious than Todd. I have lovely tools, but it doesn't keep anxiety from coming up. I tend to be more concerned about the safety of my children, the world. Like they're in a huge car. It's just a crazy process. Yeah. And one of my daughters, she drives fast. I mean, let me just say it like that. And there's part of me as a parent that's like, she's just learning. She has, I have to let go. But see, that thing I need to continually have a discussion with her, because this isn't an issue of, why don't you get in an accident? Then you'll learn this process.
Yeah,
this
right. You could lose your daughter.
Concern. Exactly.
Scary.
So
super scary.
And at the same time, I have to realize she's a new driver. She's 17 years old. Her brain isn't fully developed. She thinks she's immortal. I have to weigh understanding her. And then I also need to make sure I don't deplete her confidence in driving, but also realize that there's a safety issue. And it's a constant conversation of, especially when I'm in the car with her, is you're doing an amazing job. But when we're here, it's actually 25 miles per hour. And sometimes that's like, oh, mom. But see, I'm okay I wasn't okay with bothering my 4-year-old about, don't you want to be Cinderella instead? Gross things like that. But in a car, I am willing to step in over and over again, because this is a safety issue for her, for me, for everybody. So
it's like drugs or
you got it.
Whatever the issue is. Yeah.
You got it.
Nice. Love that. And as parents, we're constantly making those choices, right? When do I step in? When do I let go here? I'm curious, while we're on the subject of that kind of stepping in versus letting go, how has your family navigated screens in this day and age with social media and screens? That's a big one parents of teens in particular ask is, man, my kid's going to get really fucked up on this, Snapchat or Instagram or whatever the latest app is. And over here, it looks like you guys are navigating adolescence quite well with your children and screens and the whole, whatever the challenges teens are facing with COVID and all that. So yeah. How have you guys navigated that?
Well, there's been a lot of steps along the way. Like when we made a decision that the girls we had all these like rational reasons why we were doing what we were doing, meaning we really thought about, which I think is the first step. How do we want to do this screen thing? Because I'll just start from when they got phones, because there's a whole nother story of when they were young and watching TV, but we're kind of past that time. So the decision was our girls had to start taking a bus when they went into 6th grade, which meant they had to leave our house, walk away, get on a bus, be on their own. So we decided that was the year they would get a phone when they, went into 6th grade. So that was, it had reason and rhyme to it, because in case the bus wasn't there or it was too cold or something happened, they could contact us. Then we also made a decision that they would not get any kind of social networking that were basically, it was the kind of social networking where people could comment on them or that they could post things until they were 13. So they knew that when they got their phone, they could call, they could text, they had some games, but there was no social networking till 13. And it's kind of hard for me to remember exactly, especially with my first, but because they knew up front, it wasn't much of an argument. There wasn't like a day where they're like, can I have Snapchat? And I was like, I don't know. Wait, let me think. Like we knew. So there's a lot of pre-thinking about how you want to do this. So your kids don't get confused about what's expected and what's not. When they finally did, because now all three of them have social networking, my youngest daughter got it last year. We had a whole contract that we wrote up about expectations. Nice. We actually did that when they got their phone too. A different kind of contract. It was more about what they'd pay for. This is, be thoughtful about this. We talked about brain development. We gave them the whole works, right? Yeah. And they signed it and we signed it. But with social networking, there was basic things like don't post any kind of picture that you wouldn't be willing to show your grandmother. Just real basic. And that was on Snapchat too, because those pictures disappear, as we know. When you're making comments are fun, have a good time, but make sure there's no intention to harm, make sure that you're thoughtful, maybe even take a breath before you post that comment. Things like that, where if you don't have that discussion, they can so easily make so many mistakes until they have to learn the hard way. Yeah. And I will be very clear. All three of my girls have had struggles with social networking. This plan we created didn't eliminate the struggles. It just helped them. We had clarity of intention. So when we had conversations, they knew, and they also knew they could come to us and talk about it. We don't have a lot of fear. They're not afraid to come to us and say, I've made this mistake. But it allowed for an ongoing conversation that continues today.
It's cool. And I'm hearing this is an area where we get to, as parents, put our values onto our kids if we think it's best for them, right? And that obviously is really, there's a wide range there of one parent's going to think this is okay, and another parent's going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. Yep. You took your 5-year-old to, The Matrix 4, like, what are you doing? But this is, can you speak to that we're not like with the piano lessons example where parents have these agenda. You're going to be my little athlete. You're going to be my little princess. You're going to be my little whatever, mini me. Right. That's different than what you just talked about, where it's like, we're going to provide a culture we believe is good for their development and makes them good contributing members of society, right?
You got it. You got it. The language we use most in this home is dignity. Dignity, your dignity, and the dignity of others. And, I actually, I really love that she did it. Rosalind Wiseman, who is a friend of ours, she wrote Queen Bees and Wannabes, and she has an organization called Cultures of Dignity. And it's like the best name. Like I could not think of a better name for an organization. I was so jealous. And what she differentiates between is respect and dignity. And respect is something that people earn because of what they put out in the world and the work they do and how they treat people. And so respect, a lot of times people will say you need to respect all adults. And I don't really agree with that. There's adults that are not doing things that are respectable. Yeah. And there's reasons why the age shouldn't, force us to respect. But dignity is about understanding that all people have inherent humanity and that we are all on the same level as far as being human beings, and that we need to have and again, first starting with us, that we carry the dignity and that we then offer that to other people. I fear that if we don't have that understanding of dignity, that's when dehumanization occurs, where we start to really believe that people are less worthy, that it's okay to treat them with disdain, that it's okay to be name calling because we're like, well, they did this or they're this person. So it could even be justified. They even try and justify with things like, there's some political leaders out there, some people out there who do some things that I am pretty adamantly against. I can decide to not respect these people, but they still they're worthy human beings. Yeah, and it's to treat them in a way that's dehumanizing is not okay.
Right, I'm with you. It's like basic goodness. It's like the Buddhist sort of thing.
You got it.
Everybody's got it in them. Not everybody's tapped into that and expressing it, but
yep.
Hey, what if people were inherently, decent human beings, all worthy of love and respect inside?
Exactly. And what if, and this is the hard part, I struggle with this still, but this is always my what if they're doing the best they can right now with the traumas they have experienced, with the pain they haven't, felt, and with the resources they have today. there are people who are doing great, who find themselves to be highly enlightened, highly aware, and they hit walls and make poor choices. There are people we have been like looking at saying, oh my gosh, they just keep making mistakes. And then one day they turn it around and they're like, I see now. So that ability to give that space for someone to demonstrate their willingness to tap into their humanity, I think is important.
Does this help you, this kind of approach help you not get caught blaming parents? Because it can be very tempting, because if we look at the problems of the world, we could easily start to zero in on how we raise children.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And go, oh, well, that needs to change, which is, I think, why you and I do what we do, right? It's like we want to have an impact on how we raise young people. And I'm curious, like, because I get caught for sure just like getting so judgy of like some people's approach. How do you work with that in yourself?
That is, there's two parts. Like the word that comes to me always is compassion, right? Like, just like dignity, you have to practice self-compassion first. You understand what that means, what that feels like, and then offering that to others. And the truth is, be doing that too. And I just see me in you. And the good news is we see each other in each other. So there's all these other possibilities too, that there's always this offering of hope. Like there is another path. It's not well worn and you may not have been down it yet, but there is another way. So do I feel judgment sometimes, Jason? 100%. I mean, it's hard not to especially when it's really, when parents are harming kids, just blatantly harming them, physically, emotionally. My big but is there are reasons why people learn to do what they do. And I would say the vast majority of it is they were harmed, hurt people, as they say. So
yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I always say all human behavior is understandable if you can have the curiosity and patience to try to understand someone, where they come from. You
got it.
Yeah. That doesn't mean I agree with it, right? It just means like, I get where you come from, and holy shit, how you're doing this makes sense now.
One of the things that, again, as teaching college students, that I always say to them is, many of my students come in, they're social justice warriors, right? They're like, we are going to help, this community, and we are going to fight this battle. And I always have to remind them, as clinicians or as social workers, you don't just help someone who's a victim or a survivor. You help the pedophile. You help the person who raped. You help the person who is in prison for murder. You are a bridge to humanity. And you have got to see the humanity in all people, that the person who is harming children, as we just already said, was most likely harmed as a child, and that we are trying to, even if someone had, and this doesn't mean they don't have consequences. These people are in prison. They may have life sentences. They may have death sentences, but there is still a humanity, and they still need support in whatever way, shape, and form to make sure they have, under the law, due process, and also just understanding humanity, the respect, or I should say dignity, that they deserve in that situation. Yeah, love that. Do you get pushback from some of those younger, fired up college kids? Like always. Oh, I mean, and just like you do about relationships and parents, I get pushback about a lot of these things. And a lot of people say, oh, well, that's pie in the sky, or that's, you've got rose-colored glasses, or that would never work, or Cathy, we need to be harder on people. And I think one thing, I turned 50 this year, and not to put everything on age, but I've tried all of the things, like not everything. I have plenty of life to live, but I've been studying this since I was 25. We've been reading the research. I've been working with parents. I've worked in all these settings, and it comes down to these really basic things. And sometimes it's so simple, it's hard for people to believe it's true. Yeah. And the simpleness is compassion, connection, relationship, dignity. And people are like, it can't be that. It's got to be harder than that. It's not. Nice. Why Zen Parenting? Well, when Todd and we came up with that name, I remember where we were. We were like getting breakfast after a yoga class, and we're like, what are we going to call this podcast? And we really liked the kind of street understanding of that word, which is calm, laid back, what people think about as being Zen, because that's what we were trying to, exude. But as we got into it, especially when we picked up the yin yang symbol as our symbol, because really yin yang is about the balance of both, of masculine, feminine, light, dark, however you want to look at it. And then they have the dot of the other inside of them, meaning that everything is of each other. You can't have light without dark. You can't have shadow without, it's everything. Harmony is trusting both, which was perfect for Todd and I, him being masculine, me being feminine. I'm more spiritual, he's more practical. It just really worked out well. And then as we got into really studying Zen, because I really got into studying it, not as a religion, but as a deep understanding, an educational process. And Zen is, and I'm going to leave everybody with this, it doesn't have a definition. It's not being chill. It is the understanding of self-awareness and the understanding of present moment and the feeling of acceptance and surrender. It's like I say at the beginning of the book, the Tao, the first stanza of the Tao is about, the basic understanding is once you try and name the Tao, it loses its understanding. Yeah. And Zen is the same way.
It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no words, but it is a acceptance of our humanity, an acceptance of this present moment. And then the best part, my favorite, is an appreciation and gratitude for this time.
Yeah, nice. A couple more questions before we wrap up here. How important is your relationship with Todd in parenting?
It's everything. I mean, Todd and I are, our practice with each other, as far as our connection, all these words we're talking about, our understanding of each other, our ability to relate to each other and stay connected, is our practice ground for parenting. All of these things, and we just had breakfast right before I came on this with you, Jason. Like Todd and I just went out, and it's very difficult for Todd and I not to have deep talks. Everything is about what happened yesterday. How are we going to feel next week? He's going on a retreat this weekend with Men Living, his organization. And one of our struggles is when he returns after being gone 3 or 4 days, we have a disconnection because I've been on and he's been having these deep experiences with all these men, and he wants to share. And I want to be like, give me a break. And we always struggle with that when he comes back in. So now what we do is we sit down and we talk about how he's going, we're taking it a step before you come home, how will we reconnect so it doesn't have to take so long? We're trying to, the lag time. So I guess my point in telling that story is we are each other's most important people in how to relate. And then that practice connects to our parenting. It connects how I am with my mom, connects how I am with my friends. It's not just about Todd and I. It's about how we relate to the world.
Yeah, I love that. I feel that from you guys whenever I've been, in your home and together with you. And it's really sweet that you guys work hard to maintain a strong relationship, so that you can do what you do. And I just think it really matters for parents to hear how important the primary relationship with your partner is. Whether you're divorced or not, it's still to be respectful, to be kind, to listen, to work through the conflicts, to have the difficult conversations. It's essential. So thanks for being a model.
Thank you. And my children are, for them to be able to watch, and I'll be honest, when Todd and I have, because we are not the same, we are very similar, and obviously we're starting to look alike a little bit. We have the same glasses and stuff. I'm like, whoa, I'm starting to remind me of my own parents where we're wearing similar coats and stuff. I'm like, this is getting creepy, but we still have different viewpoints on the world. And sometimes we really have deep discussions about that. It's not about fighting and arguing. It's about, I disagree with you. I see it this way. We both have a strong platform from where we come from. And sometimes our girls are like, you guys just agree or and we're like, that's not how we do things. Right. But we also use a shit ton of humor. Humor is it's not an escape. It's our pressure valve release. It's let's air out of the balloon, because we relate through humor, pop culture. We have all sorts of ways to diffuse, which I think is really important, because we can have intense conversations, but we have ways out of it too.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. Cool. One more question. I ask all our guests this. If I had a room full of 1,000 teenagers and I could only teach them one thing about love and relationships, and you were whispering in my ear, what would you want me to tell them?
Self-awareness. Start with you. just really tune into who you are, what you need, and that will be how you find your path forward and how you connect with others, which would be my number 2, connection. But it all starts with their own self-awareness and trust that who they are is okay, that they came here to be that person. So just that awareness in itself can set them free.
Yeah, amazing. Zen Parenting, your book is out February 1st. Thanks so much for writing it. Where can people find you and this book?
So you can find me at zenparentingradio.com. Everything is there. Todd and I have all sorts of things on that website, but you can find the book and me there. And that's the best location. That's where, you can get the book everywhere. It's available everywhere. So I really appreciate you sharing it and allowing me to process through these things because I enjoy this so much. Such an interesting process.
Yeah, totally. I'm with you. I could talk about this kind of stuff all day.
Me too.
All right. Thanks, Cathy.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, action steps. Go to zenparentingradio.com. Check out Cathy and Todd. Make sure to subscribe to their podcast. Ellen and I have been on there before, as have I. These guys are just real, talking about what it's like to be parents in the trenches all day for years. They've been doing this for 10 years. So there's a huge plethora of episodes to listen to. Also, check out Cathy's new book, Zen Parenting. All right. And that's on their website, or just go to Amazon or bookshop.org, wherever you like to buy books. The action step that I want you to do is always with parenting stuff is self-reflection. Okay. Reflect on this episode and get in relationship with someone else, your spouse or a partner or a friend, and reflect on the takeaway from this episode. And maybe it was the thing about parenting teens, or maybe it was just the self-reflection, self-awareness stuff in general, getting your kid rooted in that first chakra of life, the secure attachment. What stood out to you? And share that. Just have a 5-minute, 50-minute conversation. This is the stuff Ellen and I could talk about for days. And notice if your bandwidth is smaller, and that's okay. Just notice, okay? Thanks, everyone. Have a beautiful rest of your day, morning, evening, and see you next time. As you know, I've dedicated my life to helping people with their relationships, right? I want to solve this problem so that all of you can work through your differences and have fulfilling, amazing, badass partnerships and relationships, family, coworkers, friends, whoever. And I have trained a ton of relationship coaches, almost 100 certified relationship coaches, to help you specifically work through your relationship challenges. So I want to invite you to a special deal we're offering to the podcast listener, where you can get 50% off your first month of coaching with one of our amazing relationship coaches. Okay, if you're tired of therapy, it feels like that's going around in a circle, or you want to actually set goals and accomplish your relationship goals, hire a relationship coach. Okay, go to relationshipschool.com/get coaching now, and then use the coupon code FIRST50 to get the 50% deal off your first month of relationship coaching. Super psyched to have our amazing coaches serve you and help you get to the next level. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share one of these videos with a friend. We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.